Welcome back to another CPaaSAA Talk. And I'm here today with Alex and Niv. I'm really excited because we're going to talk about the announcement they did a couple weeks ago about Kiro. Alex, let's start with you. What exactly did you launch and why is this significant?
Yeah, so what we launched was the what's called the Vonage API Power for Kiro, which is essentially the extensibility model that Kiro has, which is an agentic IDE from AWS, is called a Power. And so what we did is invested time and resources to be able to build that power that essentially makes it dead simple for a developer using Kiro to be able to get going against the Vonage APIs. And
Cool.
yeah, at a high level, that's what we launched. And so the idea there is that we are able to get that Kiro developer, instead of having to build a whole bunch of manual scaffolding and stuff to get going, they install through a single click the Kiro Power, and essentially that helps them connect to our MCP servers that we have, and then enable that developer to really go from 0 to 1 a lot faster, and taking out a lot of the manual processes that might be required in order to be able to start programming against our APIs.
Cool, cool. Niv, for the people listening that don't really know what Kiro is, why don't you give us a one-on-one on what it does and how it works?
So in general, Kiro is an ID, right? It's a developer environment that the developers are using. I'm trying to take it in the broader way of that. So when a developer using an ID want to develop, but what we did with Kiro, we take it to the next level. Instead of having just an AI native ID to chat completion or vibing with your developer environment, now you can basically what we're doing. We have a natural language spec driven, meaning that you are starting the discussion with your AI and AI developing environment in a way that you're building the spec from requirement, designing, and tasks. That way, you're basically creating the right flow in the programming from the requirement steps to the design itself, and then the outcome you're receiving is it will be pretty precise about what you decided to start with, because you build a flow with your AI engine that now it knows what you expect to have. So it's not like, hey, start to write an application and then iterating in the end all over again because it's too far away from what you expected. That way you're building a specs that others can fulfill and continue in the future, and it will be easier to them to basically understand what is the purpose of the application, and also agents can easily understand what is the purpose of this effort. So we talk about ID, we talk about next generation ID that basically have inside a natural language support that have a spec driven. So all the flow from ideation to a product through natural language specifications.
Wow, this sounds amazing. We just talked in the prep that I told you that and this shows my age, that I used to be a developer when I was a kid, when I was in high school, and we would do stuff in C and assembly and really hardcore, and now it's all about vibe coding, and it's about working with natural language and working with these environments and harnesses, etc., to get your agentic things to, let's say, behave right. And it's so interesting. I find it so interesting because CPaaS, and that includes like network APIs. There's this vision, that idea that it's an API, and then there's a developer that has to understand the API documentation, and it has to he or she has to then write code to access the API, and that's how we're all going to make money in telcos, right? With network APIs. This is just such a different world, it seems to me.
Yeah.
Where a developer has a totally different role. It's more an architect, and it's
Yeah, and it's changing the work that we need to do as platform providers and API providers. All right. So our primary persona for decades now has been the human developer, just as you said, needs to pick up the IDE, needs to go to developer.vonage.com in this case. They need to be able to then start reviewing the documentation. They may then start, making their first API call. and they need to understand and absorb, what the right integration patterns against any given API and the rest of it. And everything that we were doing was solving for ultimately a human.
Right.
The shift now is that we've got a new persona, a new explicit persona called the agent. And so the investments that we've been making now are basically acknowledging the second persona and now optimizing our entire surface area for agentic consumption, right? And so now the human developer using an agentic IDE, for example, like Kiro, is able then to start leveraging that agentic optimization that we've made, MCP servers as an example, skills as an example, optimizing our documentation, for example, against our open API spec, which is machine readable. You can just keep going through the various different building blocks that you need to be able to provide a developer platform, and literally just go through the process of, right, great, what do we need to change, do differently, optimize for the new persona, the agents.
So
Right.
you touch it, Alex. It's a great perspective. Where we were on the IDE side, and you spoke about Rob. Back then where we had black hair, everybody, and it's like I thought my journey in Visual Basic, I think, was 4, if I remember correctly. So it was phases of integration. We always the big barrier was, hey, how we can integrate to more and more databases and systems and application. Back then we had a SOAP, then we had we moved to Swaggers with open API standards. That's fine, but still it was integration. One of the biggest advantages that we're seeing today in modern IDEs, where we have the AI agents inside the IDE, that he has the option, to start to connect to those, or we call those tools, specialized agents, like the Kiro Power we have with Vonage. So basically, we have this specialized AI agent, but it's still not enough. And that's like the biggest announcement we had also with Vonage. The latest announcement, we had with Vonage is about the Kiro Power, because instead of paying the setup tax, right, the integration tax that we have until this things is working, think about the developer need to context switch, start to read documentation from Vonage or switch to others, whatever, and then he needs to start to read all those documentation, understand how to do the setup, how to do the integration. Super easy. Use the Kiro Power in a single click. He's getting integration to inside ID. Now his agents know to read another specialized agent and benefit from Vonage services offering through the Kiro Power. So the integration just simplify again the way that the engineer can continue to be focused about, instead of spending time on integration and setup, just pointing out, let's focus about what we want to do, what the product, what is the purpose of we are developing right now, and focusing on the specs and making sure that for future proof, somebody else will say, hey, who developed that? Now it's easier to read it because it's spec driven. We have a natural language, and it's easier to connect it in the future.
I love it. And I was at Race Summit in Paris recently. 9,000 people. I don't know. I think I counted $6.5 trillion of valuation of all these companies, right, in the AI space. It's it's a thing, right? AI. And one of the topics on stage there that came back all the time was software development, right? Software development, product development. It's being radically changed as we speak, right? Where now we can read it everywhere, and it was on stage last week. More code is generated by agents than by humans already, and we're just getting started, right? And everybody has these sort of projections in the next 1 to 3 years as these tools get better, because there's still there's still flaws and hallucinations and stuff like that. But we're just looking at the worst version of these AI platforms that we're ever going to see, right?
Yeah.
So it's going to be crazy. So, and you just said, Alex, you're now making let's say the Vonage CPaaS available to a new type of user. But isn't this like the most important type of users to make your stuff available for now?
Yeah. So I think you touched on something that's really important around the amount of basically the commits and the PRs that we're seeing now being generated with agentic support across the software development lifecycle. One thing that we keep hearing in the industry overall is like, what about the quality, right? Is this a good quality PR? How do we make sure that it's, following the right policies, the right patterns, the right guidelines, and the rest of it? I think part of the motivation of this Kiro Power, for example, is to educate the agent about what is the right integration pattern. So, for example, an API, call it the SIM swap detection, or silent authentication wrapped around the Verify API. What that does is it protects the developer and their mobile app from potential fraud and the end user from potential fraud by reducing the risk that there has been some kind of man-in-the-middle type attack on all the rest of it. And so SIM swap, for example, is simply an API that can be called that says, hey, this phone is trying to access this application. Tell me, when was the last time when was the last time the SIM swap occurred? It doesn't actually give you the information back, but it can tell you it's an issue. There's a flag you should be concerned about. And now the developer can then make a risk-adjusted decision about whether they want to allow that user to log in to that secure application. Just as a relatively simple use case. Has a lot of value for the developer.
That's the whole network API discussion, Project Camara, that's been playing in the world of mobile operators for the last couple of years.
Yeah, that's one example. And the idea is
with developers, right? It's complicated.
Yeah, and also you've got multiple operators in multiple geographies, right? If you try to solve this problem for yourself, maybe having to go to each of the operators, could you think about the N plus matrix of different integrations that you would need to make, whether you're talking about one carrier phone versus another carrier phone? We solve that problem by allowing you to be able to integrate once, write once, and it'll run across all the markets and all the operators that we solve for. So that's a real concrete use case there, an example of a network API. Now, back to the guidance piece, is that the Kiro Power will then include skills and guidance about what the right integration pattern is, which then reduces the risk of further down the line when you're going through the process of quality assurance and this, that, and the other, that you're going to increase the chance of having a higher quality counted output that can then be committed to production, right? And so the education to the agent about the right integration pattern is a core piece of the value that we're delivering.
No context overhead. That's what we're saying. There is no overhead of knowing the context. Don't expect the engineers to have this knowledge. You start to research how the API works, or how back then, God help us, the WSDLs that we had back then before the SOAP. So we had all those type of in technology or the path that require a lot of engineers to research how to integrate to a specific service before they can use it, right? Now, when we talk about the integration part of it, that Kiro basically streamlined that in a way that you have a context on demand. You have the solution on demand. You don't need to start to overhead yourself or overload, with all the knowledge or research that you need to do before using Vonage services. So Kiro Power basically gives that on demand.
I love it. I think in the press release, it says that it changes development time from months to hours.
Yeah.
And I get how that can work, because you include that entire context. And as you said, Alex, it works in different parts of the world using different signals from the network, whatever's available. You take care of that in the CPaaS already. And now in Kiro, it becomes so much easier to use this stuff by describing the outcome instead of by coding against an API.
You got it. Here's my use case. This is the problem I want to solve as a developer, speaking to Kiro, right? Yeah. I know that Vonage has a set of APIs that can help solve that problem. Fantastic. And across voice, our voice APIs, video APIs, messaging APIs, network APIs, such as, like I mentioned, verification and other network capabilities, that whole process of trying to absorb and understand how these APIs work is collapsed dramatically. and then the code gen, and then the testing cycles and the rest of it keeps collapsing dramatically. And so the level of productivity for the developer is dramatically improved.
So, and I can point you on if you want, Rob. It's a public announcement, so it's not like we are holding something. But there is an article from Andy, our CEO, that says that the 6 engineers in 76 days are using Kiro, basically did a job of 1 year, just spec driven. So and in 76 days we build, and it's official, it's public, so we can read it, and it's just amazing. I think our human mind even not realizing how much more efficient we can be using AI correctly, right? So, and spec driven is not something that we are. It goes without saying. It's help developers to connect to the code more easily, because it's not just auto completion and then who knows what he built. No, we have a documentation of the process and the food process, the thoughts that he had step by step before creating the code.
Cool. So it's live, right? The announcement was that this is part of Kiro. It's available, can be used. Can you say anything about? Do you see people starting to use it? Do they all of a sudden are we seeing new crazy applications being developed on top of network APIs?
We have a pretty large developer community that includes startups, for example, and we know that some of those startups are Kiro users and AWS users. So we're really excited to see how they're going to be using those capabilities. From our standpoint, it's an interesting problem that isn't unique to us, and just sharing that visibility about, is it an agent that's interacting with our APIs or a developer developed code, is opaque to us. And I think that's a problem across the board. So what we're not able to share is like highly specific metrics. That said, I think we're doing some great partnering with Niv's team at AWS, is being able to go to their developer conferences, going to their Kiro user groups and the events and the community events that they have, and really just to show the power of both Kiro plus our APIs along with this plugin, and drive some real interesting new innovations that can occur with that developer community. So it's early days. We've only just launched it, but I'm confident and excited about the opportunities ahead.
I know we're going to be covering this subject more at our event in September in Amsterdam, CPaaSAA 26. So that's like 2 months. That's like 20 dog years away, right? It's exciting. I think it's a really interesting time to be alive and to be a developer or be in the developer community. Thank you so much for spending time with me here. I'll let you go back to work, Niv, because you have free agents waiting for you to
They don't have a lunch time. Yeah.
No. They may need your approval for something. Alex, Niv, both of you, thank you so much, and I look forward to talking again very, very soon.
Thank you, Alex.
Thanks.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Rob, for having us. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Niv, too.